This is the Israeli version of the Pentagon, Kiryat Eye. The building on this component is just, please, return it, please. You can understand that it's very quiet here in this special area because the Iranians are currently targeting Israel's equipment.
On the night of Saturday, June 14th, Iran continued massive rocket attacks on Israeli territory. Unfortunately, some of them were successful. It is already known that there are a certain number of dead and wounded in Israel. Moreover, there is already video evidence of the extensive destruction. And just recently, a correspondent from the television channel showed that Iranian ballistic missiles struck the central headquarters of the Israel Defense Forces in Tel Aviv, which is referred to as Israel's equivalent of the Pentagon. According to the correspondent, as a result of a direct hit, one of the buildings in the Israeli Pentagon complex was struck and the damage is quite significant. This strike was part of a large-scale Iranian response to Israeli attacks on nuclear facilities and the top leadership of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And overall, the entire night of June 14th was marked by exchanges of strikes because Iran attacked Israel throughout the night, and Israel likewise carried out strikes on Tehran, where there is also destruction. Overall, both sides report that after that night, unfortunately, there are casualties, there are wounded, and there is quite serious destruction on both sides. And I suggest that in this episode, we take a closer look at the latest news regarding the escalation in the Middle East. Where is all this heading, and what are the consequences of the mutual attacks that took place that night? My name is Alexei Pechi. We'll go through everything step by step, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment you like. Because this helps the algorithms promote this episode so that as many viewers as possible can see the truth. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So it's been more than a day since Israel launched a large-scale two-pronged attack on Iran aimed at destroying the country's nuclear facilities and decapitating its military leadership in Tehran. Iran, which had promised a devastating response to the attack, carried out several waves of deadly strikes on various locations across Israel throughout the night and Saturday. Both sides are reporting fatalities and numerous injuries. On Saturday morning, sirens sounded in Israel. Meanwhile, reports came in from Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Tehran about, since the escalation of the conflict threatens to draw the Middle East into a larger-scale war. But to briefly go over what happened that night, Iranian forces launched several waves of missiles toward Israel on Saturday night. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran stated that on Friday it carried out missile strikes on Israeli military centers and air bases. But if we look at the footage of the destruction in Israel, we can see that it was actually civilian areas and ordinary residential buildings that were affected. And there are no military bases or military centers anywhere nearby, although there were indeed some hits on military targets as well. Meanwhile, Tehran's air defense systems were activated until Saturday morning. After another round of Israeli attacks, the Israeli military stated that they intercepted some of the latest wave of Iranian missiles. But there are reports of people trapped under the rubble, under the debris of buildings, as well as reports of destroyed and damaged homes. Emergency crews responded to the fallen projectiles. Loud explosions were heard in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Iran's retaliatory strikes killed at least 2 people, according to Israeli authorities. It is known that 1 person was killed and more than 20 were injured after an Iranian missile landed near homes in Rishon LeZion. That's to the south of Tel Aviv. And another woman was killed when a piece of shrapnel fell in Ramat Gan, which is also near Tel Aviv. The Israeli envoy to the United States earlier stated that about 40 people were injured. Later, information appeared that more than 80 people have already been wounded. In Iran, as a result of Israeli strikes, at least 78 people were killed, including high-ranking military officials. This was stated on Friday by Iran's envoy to the United Nations, Amir Saidi-Ravani. More than 320 people were injured in Iran, most of them reportedly civilians. This is a statement by Amir Saidi-Ravani. The Israeli military stated that on Friday they struck 2 Iranian air bases used for missile and drone operations. They include the Hamadan Air Base in western Iran and the Tabriz Air Base. This is a site for launching surface-to-surface missiles in the northwest of that country. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz stated late Friday night that Iran had crossed red lines by firing directly at civilian population centers. And he vowed that they would pay a very high price. Iran stated that it would intensify its attacks on Israel and target regional bases of any country that tries to defend Israel. Netanyahu warned Iran on Friday that things would get even worse. The 6th round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran was supposed to begin on Sunday. United States President Donald Trump said that Washington's talks with Iran are still scheduled, although he is not sure they will happen at all. Trump stated that Iran might have another chance to reach a nuclear agreement and hinted that the Iranians are reaching out to him to resume nuclear talks after all. But in fact, already this morning, on Saturday, the Iranian side stated that it sees absolutely no point in these talks after the escalation in the Middle East and is effectively withdrawing from these negotiations. How did we even end up in this situation? Let me briefly remind you that on Friday morning, Israel launched a wave of unprecedented strikes against Iran, hitting key facilities of the country's nuclear program as well as residential areas in the capital, Tehran, and killing several of the country's high-ranking military leaders. Israel has repeatedly insisted on a military option to stop Iran's nuclear program. And on Friday, Israel stated that Tehran was advancing, quote, a secret program to assemble nuclear weapons and was closer than ever to being able to obtain them. Iran has repeatedly insisted that it is not building a bomb and that its nuclear program is intended solely for energy purposes. But in this context, it should be noted that Israel is specifically targeting military facilities, air bases, nuclear sites, missile storage locations, and ballistic missile launchers. And we see a lot of videos about this online. And by the way, yesterday I recommended that you definitely watch my previous episode about the beginning of Israel's attack on Iran. That was on Friday morning. There are actually a lot of documentary files there that confirm the attacks were carried out specifically on military targets in Iran. All of this is documented, so I recommend you go to my channel and watch yesterday's episode to be fully up to date on what's happening. And there is one episode that they are still trying to hide in Israel. The thing is, a correspondent showed live on air how Iranian ballistic missiles struck the central headquarters of the Israel Defense Forces in Tel Aviv. It's called the Israeli equivalent of the Pentagon. And the correspondent showed how, as a result of a direct hit, one of the buildings in the complex was struck, and the damage was quite significant. The strike was part of a large-scale Iranian response to Israeli attacks on nuclear facilities and the top leadership of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. At the same time, despite the active Israeli and American missile defense systems, including Iron Dome, David's Sling, Patriot, and Arrow, some missiles still managed to reach their targets. And crucially, they actually hit what is known as the Israeli Pentagon. And as the correspondent reports, about 150 Iranian ballistic missiles were aimed at this country throughout the evening. They target both residential areas and military facilities. He also said that as a result of the Iranian strikes, an entire block was almost completely destroyed. Rescue teams are searching for people under the rubble using thermal images. Quote, as a result of a direct shell hit in the center of the country, 2 people were seriously injured and were eventually declared dead. A little later, it was reported that in Tel Aviv, 5 people were killed as a result of the attacks, and at least 80 more were injured, many of them seriously. There are also reports of extensive destruction of buildings and infrastructure, and power outages are being reported throughout Jerusalem. While not critical at present, these attacks still have consequences. But next, I want to show you a video clip from that very live broadcast, where the correspondent of this television channel actually shows the destruction at the headquarters of the Israel Defense Forces. And at some point, the military force him out of this area as much as possible so that what is happening isn't shown any further. I understand that most likely this is for the safety of the correspondent himself, but on the other hand, it's also an attempt to remove the camera from this area.
You can understand that it's very cramped here in this special area because the Iranians are now targeting the equipment.
Israel's.
And that's why I'm going to set up my camera here in this building right down the street from Kiryat. You can see that it's very cramped here because then again the Iranians were able to just shoot at a very important target in Israel. We hope that more ballistic missiles won't be fired at our country. We understand that Israel's security system was active during the third attack. We were in the suburbs of Tel Aviv, at the place where the shooting happened. One woman was killed there and more than 20 were wounded. Music is playing, music.
And now it's already obvious that the Israeli intelligence service Mossad is acting more and more openly on the territory of Iran. Israel carried out one of the largest operations in its history, striking Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. But the most impressive thing was that this attack didn't start from the air, but from inside Iran itself. And according to sources in Israeli security services, Mossad special agents infiltrated Iranian territory in advance, smuggled in weapons, planted explosives near key air defense sites, and set up a base for launching drones. These actions paralyzed Iran's defense system before the start of the massive airstrike, and according to official data, more than 200 aircraft took part in the air operation, hitting more than 100 targets. The high-precision weapons delivered by Israeli special forces were used to destroy Iranian surface-to-air systems near Tehran and Ai. As a result, the Israeli Air Force operated nearly unimpeded. All the aircraft returned to base without losses, even though they were actually operating in Iranian airspace. One of the main targets were Iranian military commanders and scientists, particularly those connected to the nuclear program. Sources say Israeli intelligence operated at the center of Iran, especially in the capital, Tehran. Numerous cases of assassinations and bombings have been recorded, filmed on video, and published by the Israeli side itself. This operation is truly the culmination of a long-standing conflict between Israel and Iran, which has been unfolding in the shadows for decades. The fact is that starting as early as 2007, Mossad has repeatedly carried out assassinations of nuclear scientists on Iranian territory, among whom, by the way, was Fakhrizadeh. He was killed in 2020. In addition, in 2018, agents stole an entire nuclear archive from Tehran, more than 55,000 files, which were presented at a press conference by then Prime Minister Netanyahu. Feridun Abbasi was also killed in the latest attack. He was one of the key specialists in Iran's nuclear program, who stated back in May that strikes on the facilities would not affect the schedule for developing nuclear weapons, because, quote, nuclear materials are not stored above ground. In May of this year, Abbasi directly stated that Iran is developing nuclear weapons and that bombing them won't interfere because everything is underground. And for years, Mossad has treated Iran as its, playground. From assassinations to various acts of sabotage. Israel has always had the advantage in this shadow war. Notably, Israel eliminated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran before the attack even started. And, according to Israeli sources, the explosive device was planted in the guest house where he was staying and was detonated remotely at the right moment. And despite the loud statements from the Iranian side about protection and retaliation, numerous security failures indicate serious internal weakness. And the successes of Israeli intelligence are explained not only by professionalism on the one hand, but also by a regime that is hated even by the majority of its own Iranian people. That is, when Netanyahu addressed the Iranian people yesterday, it was quite a telling episode in this war. Because indeed, not everyone inside Iran supports this regime. And when Netanyahu says that we are not fighting against you, we are fighting against the regime, that's true. And the fact that Mossad rather casually, excuse me for the expression, carries out operations on Iranian territory, even in the capital, suggests that most likely there are many Iranians who possibly even help Mossad. Because they also want to get rid of this regime, which makes its very existence its main goal. This is the destruction of Israel. This is an attempt to sow the chaos of terror throughout the Middle East and so on. Because all these well-known proxy forces, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Yemeni Houthis, the axis of resistance in Iraq, and certain forces that were in Syria, all of this is financed specifically by Iran, and it is these forces that constantly carry out military provocations, attacks on Israel, and so on. That's why, as Netanyahu stated the other day, this war will last a long time. And as sources stated yesterday, at the very least, Israel has a military operation plan for 2 weeks of continuous massive strikes on Iran in order to destroy its nuclear program and decapitate the military leadership of that country. So I'll leave it at that. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially by donating through the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the quick response code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.